LeBron James is 6 feet 9 inches tall. He weighs some 250 pounds and is considered by many to be the greatest basketball player there is. The Michael Jordan of basketball, you might say. No, wait, he played basketball too. Oh well. Shaquille O'Neal is 7'1" and weighs somewhere around 325 pounds. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is an inch taller at 7'2", and unlike Shaq, he could actually move, but he was always pretty thin. Suleiman Ali Nashnoush was a Libyan basketball player who was 8 feet 10 inches tall. He even acted in a French film once. Robert Pershing Wadlow is considered the tallest man in recorded history for whom there is irrefutable evidence in the form of photographs. He was 8 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 490 pounds. He was called the Gentle Giant. He died at only 22 years old back in 1940. He's said to have had a relatively normal appetite, a voice far deeper than other boys his age, and he died from an infection in his ankle. A blister formed under a poorly fitting brace. His size had been due to an overactive pituitary gland. Had he been born today, he'd never have reached that height. Modern medicine would have stopped his growth with medication and surgery. Long before basketball, there was a man who was much taller than anyone who has ever played. Long before most forms of medicine, at least one man grew even taller than Robert Pershing Wadlow. In the 11th century BC, there was a man from the town of Gath who was 9 feet 9 inches tall. We don't know his weight, but the head of his spear weighed 15 pounds and his armor weighed 125. He was covered in bronze. His name was Goliath. When Saul was king over Israel, they were constantly fighting with their neighbors, the Philistines. The Philistines were among the neighboring tribes that Israel was supposed to have either killed or chased out of the land so that they could settle it as a haven for the worship of the true God in a world of paganism and idolatry. For various reasons, Israel failed, and their neighbors were a constant source of both antagonism and temptation for them. In the land allotted to the Israelite tribe of Judah, the Philistines drew up battle lines against Israel between Soko and Azekah. Each army took a hill, with a valley between them. And every day, Goliath, covered in bronze and towering over everyone in both armies, probably over everyone who has ever lived, would lumber out into the valley and challenge Israel to send their best to fight him and decide the victory for the rest. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. And you already know what happens next, right? A shepherd boy named David kills the giant Goliath. It's a real David and Goliath story, because it's the actual one. And the lesson is that with God on your side, anything is possible. But what's the lesson if you look at it from Goliath's perspective? Nowadays, if you're huge, you can be a professional athlete. You can use your size to achieve success and respect and renown and, of course, money. Back then, being a soldier worked the same way. How many victories did Goliath secure for his brothers in arms without a drop of blood being shed? His size won success and respect and renown and money for himself, but it also saved lives. Even if someone did dare face him, then only one person needed to die instead of hundreds. And so characterizing the fight between David and Goliath as a real David and Goliath story makes it seem like Goliath's size was the real enemy to be defeated. It wasn't. It was fear. Fear was the reason the Israelites hadn't obeyed God and wiped out their enemies. Fear was why the Philistines were a constant source of antagonism and temptation. Fear was Goliath's real weapon against the Israelites. David accepted Goliath's challenge because he feared God more than a nearly 10-foot tall giant. And David won because God is much more terrifying. And with a stone lodged in his head, Goliath had only a nearly 10-foot fall within which to realize that. Whatever he weighed, it fell like a sack of bricks immediately after David proved that God was more powerful. But the only lesson Goliath could have maybe learned was that God is terrifyingly strong, terrifyingly big, terrifyingly powerful. And there's no reason to think that Goliath even learned that lesson, only that he was the object lesson of that lesson. Just like the Philistines were supposed to have been, along with all the pagan and idolatrous tribes God commanded Israel to kill or chase out of the Promised Land. They were supposed to have been an object lesson to the world about fearing God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When God shows us that he is scarier than giants or armies or pagan nations or infected blisters or freakishly tall and freakishly talented athletes, that's only the beginning. It's a baby step on the path to being wise, to watch God topple Goliath. A baby step towards learning that the God we should fear is the God we can love because he loves us. You and I are dust and breath, loved by God, bought by Jesus. This podcast is written and produced by me, Ethan Cherney, a WELS pastor serving Our Savior Lutheran Church in Pomona, California. Get in touch on Facebook at Dust and Breath Pod, on Twitter at Dust Breath Pod, or by emailing dustandbreathpod@gmail.com. Outro music is arranged and performed by Mr. Peter Shawy, who is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you could leave a review in iTunes or just share an episode on social media, I'd really appreciate it. It's the only way other people can find the show. Now, go do what God made you to do. Be who God called you to be. Go see what God can do with dust and breath and faith in Jesus, his Son.